Coming to you from Chicago, Illinois, this is Michael Herkus, the Glam Witch. Are you ready for real talk with real witches? Well, join me as I talk to some of my favorite friends and others in the magical community. From crystal healing to cooking magic, love spells and glamour, astrology, divination, and more, I've got you covered. This is the Glam Witch Gab. Magical moments with friends. So grab your broom and come into my room for a little bit of magic. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Herkus, and thank you so much for watching the Glam Witch Gab, where I talk to some of my favorite friends and others in the magical community. Today we have on my good friend Tonya Brown, who is the author of The Door to Witchcraft, and is also the editor-in-chief of Witchway magazine, and the publisher of my book, The Glam Witch, that came out last year. So I've invited her on today to talk a little bit about cooking magic. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming on today, Tonya. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. So for others that don't know you yet, can you go ahead and just kind of give a little intro on your background and kind of what you do in the magical community?
Sure. I think like every kid who was, kidding around in the 90s, I was, a little witchy, 13-year-old. And it's just evolved and changed over the past like 2 decades. And now I, like you said, I like my big purpose in the magical community is essentially, I feel like, supporting other witches. I was just telling you, it's just recently I even put my face out there. Like that wasn't the role I wanted to play. And yeah, so we have, Witchway magazine, my podcast, The Witch Daily Show, and the 500 other little projects that exist.
Busy bee, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to come and do this. All the while maintaining a regular muggle job. So
yeah, God. Which it's funny because when I, took that, I expected it to be a very low pressure type of thing. Mm-hmm. But of course, now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, it has turned into something a little bit more stressful that I don't think I ever expected.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you today specifically about cooking magic because I'm sure you'll agree with me. I think it's a very underrated magical practice and one that I think can bring a lot of comfort to people during this time while we're in self-quarantine and dealing with all of the COVID-19 stuff. So first and foremost, how did you kind of get into that niche of cooking magic, number one? And number two, how do you integrate it into your regular everyday practice?
So yes, number one, it's very underrated. I have found myself in situations where I've had to convince people that it's not only a real thing, but in my opinion, I think it is one of the most tangible, instantaneous types of magic. Mm-hmm. I was like, when I was a kid, I was always really into the idea that you could take things and create other things. So I was very into witchy, like the idea of potions and then like cooking and all these things. And I had seen like a class that had discussed cooking magic and like different herbals. And I didn't really delve into it, but it always stuck with me. And then I'll never forget the moment I realized it was real. Like, how you have that moment of like, this is a real thing. Yeah. I remember it was a Saturday night. This was back when I worked at the public library. And I think I was like supposed to go on a date, but like my boyfriend canceled on me or like whatever. And I was just like, well, you know what? I want to go home. I want to watch like A Different World on Netflix, and I'm going to make myself some food. And I had like $30 in my bank account, but I'm like, you know what? Who cares? So I went to the grocery store. I got some chicken thighs, and I found a recipe for like a really simple cream sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such a beautiful night. Like, it was just, you know, like you have those moments in your apartment or kitchen or house where it just feels electric. It was just one of those nights. And I made my food, and I was just so content and happy in that moment. I had my show playing on the background, and I served up my food, and I took a bite, and never in my life have I felt such intense love within my being. And it was just so magical. And I was like, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
And no one talks about it.
It's really true. I can tell, like, as far as when I cook, and I'll put that out there that I'm really not a cook. I am someone that eats out all the time, and cooking is just not my forte. But when I do cook, the like three things that I'm good at, when I've been in a bad mood or something negative was going on, I can definitely taste how different my food came out. Whereas if I was in a really good mood or happy or something along those lines, as soon as I ate it, it was filled with so much more love and joy, and a better experience. So I know too, like, you and I, we talk all the time because we're totally like media witches in the fact that we grew up with like the pop culture of charms and everything else that has integrated us, our well-being as far as witches is concerned. And I know you're like a huge fan of Piper, for example, and Piper started out being like the cooking witch. Did that have any did that play any part in kind of how you picked it up, or did you find that it was just comforting to see like something small that you were interested being portrayed in the media as well?
So it's funny. There's actually, I feel like, and I guarantee everyone listening, and I know you as well, like will hear this and be like, oh yeah, where like you had these early influences, you completely forgot about them. You go up, you figure yourself out, you figure out what you love, you figure out what you're good at, and you go back and you're like, oh shit, like I didn't realize they were like, I forgot that Piper was like this cooking witch, you know?
Yes.
And it's funny too, because like I'll never forget, like there's a scene where I think it's her grandmother before she passed was like, you know, cooking something, and you see Piper running around. I think she worked at a bank at the time. She's running around, and she goes, no, this is wrong. And she like starts fixing it. And then she has no idea she's working on a potion. She just knows based off the ingredients, there's a disconnect. Yeah. And so her grandmother's like, how did you know to do that? And she's like, I just knew. And I used to think I hated cooking, like when I was younger, because I really hated like the very Americanized things. And I grew up very like low income. So we ate the same 5 things, spaghetti and like, hamburger helper, like all the time. And I hated it. It was a chore.
Yes.
It was a chore. And then when I discovered French cooking, it's like all that intuition kind of came like, flowing back. And I had a moment where I was living with some roommates, and I walk in and one of my roommates is so upset. She's like, there's something wrong with my stew. It's not right. And I go over and I, taste it. I'm like, okay, you just have to do this, 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 this. And it was like all fixed. And it was like that Piper moment.
I love it. Another big one, which I remember we've watched together and was one of my favorite ones growing up too, was Simply Irresistible with Sarah Michelle Gellar. And I feel like not a lot of people know about that movie. Somehow it's under the radar and was, again, kind of not like underrated. And then I remember watching one too, Woman on Top with Penelope Cruz, where she's cooking up magic and has this television show and enchants people with that. So yeah, I love that. And I It's just so fun. Like food is so, I'm a foodie. Like if you're a foodie and you're a witch, how can you not be into cooking magic? I mean, yes, some of us don't know how to really cook that well, but we can still appreciate it and get down into the nitty gritty of it. Now you had also mentioned French cooking. So is that your favorite style of food to cook?
For sure. And I actually have a hard time cooking other styles of food because I always want to
French, yeah.
French it up, like turn it French. And then I have to remember, no, this is an English dish. It's not a French dish. Like,
what are some of the standard staples that would make something considered a French dish? Like, is it
kind of, I think we were talking once and I said, there's only 3 dishes you ever need to know how to make. And then you're set for life. Which in my opinion is bourguignon, coq au vin, and like French onion soup. But it's basically, I feel like the main ingredients is wine, broth, tomato paste, bay leaf, and thyme. And I feel like it's perfect. Anything you make with those ingredients is going to be perfect.
So we know, like in the magical community, bay leaves are great to use for success. It's like the crown laurel. They're great to use for any kind of protection type of a magic. But I know we also had a conversation before too, like why the hell do we even use bay leaves? Like, what are they used for in cooking? Because you can't eat them. Mm-hmm. And what do they do? Like, they don't have a smell to me. Like, what are they used for? So for everyone else out there who's a little bit confused on what the heck a bay leaf is used for in the practical world, can you share what you told me about bay leaves?
Yeah, so bay leaves are also very popular in like Latin food as well. Because I remember there was a huge viral thing not too long ago where people were upset finding bay leaves in their Chipotle. And they were like, why are there leaves in my food? And it's like, no. So bay leaf is one of those things where it's very, very subtle, but it's very, very important. And it almost grounds the food. I don't know really how to explain it. I like to say it has almost like a tea, citrusy, very underlying taste. But when the food doesn't have a bay leaf, it almost feels like it's just not settled. It's not grounded. It's not ready to be consumed. I can always tell when I forgot to add a bay leaf. I think regular people wouldn't be able to tell.
Well, because I think it's funny because I remember the reason why I asked is it was right when we went into quarantine, and I could make some kind of beef organaise or some kind of meat sauce thing, and I had basically all of the ingredients, but I didn't have bay leaves, and I was like, well, whatever, like that doesn't have any taste anyway, and my food turned out good. But that's when we were starting to talk more, and I think that it would have balanced out a lot more of kind of the acidity that I was still tasting from it. So I think that now I have a better appreciation for bay leaves. So when I venture into the world of cooking, I will try to use them and benefit from using them.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on too, we talked about Simply Irresistible, and one thing I think that movie does really well, which that movie is why I believe time traveling exists before we die, because there's no way I didn't go back in time and create that movie. It has like my favorite actress. It's set in my favorite department store that no longer exists. Like there's a witch and it's magic. Like there's just no way. But one thing that they portray very well in Simply Irresistible is kind of how cooking magic works. So, when you do a spell, you make a charm or you do a candle spell, you focus on the ingredients and the magical properties of the ingredients. And the whole idea with cooking magic is that you are creating a spell within your food, and you can focus on the magical properties of the ingredients, the medicinal properties of the ingredients, but there's also the energy transfer. And it's like what you said, like when you're in a bad mood, your food tastes different. When you're in a good mood, your food tastes different. And this is why I say cooking magic is horrifically underrated, but why I believe it is the most instantaneous magic you'll ever experience is if we're going by the definition of magic as magic is the manipulation of energy to not create one's will, but to succeed at one's will. With cooking magic, you can infuse a feeling or emotion into the food, even if it's not one you're feeling at the moment. You got to fake it till you make it. And then anyone who eats that food is going to feel that instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to, like, let's say you and I are having a fight and I'm like, well, come over, let's sit down and talk and eat dinner. As I create that dinner, I can infuse maybe open-mindedness or forgiveness. I can infuse those emotions into the food. And then when you eat the food, you may be more willing to hear my side or come to a compromise or things like that. And Simply Irresistible captured the energy transference very well in the movie.
I love what you just said about even just, using cooking magic as a form of reconciliation. Like, I feel like a lot of times when you have some kind of a petty disagreement between friends, family members, lovers, anything like that, a lot of times just coming together to just eat again or share a dish is such a great way to just ground yourselves and get into that headspace of clarity. Like, I know in the past when I've had disagreements with people and we end up saying, let's meet up for lunch or brunch or a quick bite to eat and talk things over. Those types of disagreements and arguments were put to bed so much quicker than other ones that have lingered. So I think that's interesting. I never drew that parallel until you just mentioned that.
And it's a ritual. Like, sitting down for a meal is a ritual. It's something we've cultured over hundreds of years to do a certain way,
I think it's funny too, I think people don't understand how ritual translates in so many different ways. Like, we know them as witches, like our moon rituals and the very textbook format of casting a circle and all of that stuff. But literally everything that we kind of do in life follows a ritual recipe type of a thing. Even with glamour magic, which I think is also very underrated. We're every day looking in the mirror. We're always getting ourselves ready and putting things on. Doing it with intention, infusing it with that energy is what kind of brings it to life. Same thing with cooking, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The one other thing I want to mention real quick about not practical magic, but that's another one we can talk about.
I mean, I'll talk about that.
Totally Irresistible. Like, I absolutely love the movie, but what bothers me so much in it is that they use the vanilla orchid and it's not a vanilla orchid. Like, it's another type of orchid. That always bugs me because I just love orchids so much. And I remember finding it in the store, oh, this is the vanilla orchid. Oh, it's going to smell good and taste good. No, it was not a vanilla orchid. And then I did research and now I actually do have a vanilla orchid that I don't think will ever bloom. But it's pretty.
No, that movie has its flaws for sure. One of the first dishes she makes is something called crab Napoleon.
Yes.
And what they actually show on screen has no crab.
I know. I remember.
And it's frustrating.
You were trying to recreate that. And you're like, what does this look like? Like, you tried best to kind of make it. And then I think that's how we kind of figured out, no, that was not a crab Napoleon.
Mm-hmm.
But then they also had that delicious dessert at the end where it was a peach that cream came out and then all this fog happened. That was so magical. If that could really exist in the world, I would be eating that every single day.
I'm sure.
Fabulous is that? I'm like, how can we stuff cream into a peach? I'm sure there's ways to do it, but I'm not patient enough or creative enough to do that with food.
No, that would be the food scientist people, the gastro, those people would have to figure it out. It won't be us.
No, not us. Not us. We'll just put it in our minds. It'll be our imagination comes to life. So practical magic too, it had a little bit of cooking magic in it, I believe, or at least manipulation of herbs with ingestibles and stuff, like using belladonna, which is poisonous, so don't do this at home, kids, into the tequila to kind of the drug the guy. And even at the end when they did the not the end, but in the middle where they used the whipped cream to draw the pentagram, I thought that was kind of cool too. Just how you can.
I really like too where Jilly and who's the other girl? Not Antonia, Kylie. When Jillian and Kylie are making that syrup to send Mr. Hallett away, like, you know, what they're making isn't going to kill them, but it's going to send them away. And that's definitely a form of.
Absolutely. So what are some of like your favorite recipe? Like, can you share a recipe, a very simple recipe that maybe you do regularly in a magical sense for people to kind of try or test out there?
Sure. This is what I'm drinking now. So I have a little routine that I do, and this has been the past few months, where at the end of my day, I go around the home, I pick up, and then I sit down for 2 to 3 hours to write and a project or another. And I started making this beverage, which is essentially, now cardamom's expensive, but if you do this with the same mortar and pestle, the cardamom will stay, like that taste will stay. So in a mortar and pestle, it's a cardamom pod with a pinch of cayenne pepper and then a scoop of raw cocoa powder. Give it a good grind, hot water. You can do a splash of creamer if you're into that. But the whole idea of the beverage for me is to wind down from my day, to work on these projects, and then go to bed. And these 3 ingredients lend very well to that. So if we look at, like magically, cayenne pepper and cardamom are very like mind stimulants, and they provide clarity. At least cardamom provides clarity of the mind. So I'm writing, I'm working. I want the clearest information to come out. I want the cayenne to maybe stimulate my imagination to get this project moving forward. And then cocoa is happiness and well-being, which again, it's right before, you've had a long day, maybe work sucked or you're upset about this. You want that kind of infusion of happiness and well-being. And then if we're talking medicinally, all 3 are very good for the digestive system, which I think we all want our metabolism working at best speed while we sleep. So that as well. So yeah, this is my little beverage. And then it's all good for romance if you're doing romance projects.
I love cardamom. I love the flavor. I love it, using it like in magical things. I love the scent as an oil. Like, it's just such a rich and warm, full of depth. And I think we probably like it because, for people that don't know this, but me and Tanya are 8 days apart in birth, and we're both fiery, airy signs. And we're wearing our red, and like, we just love that warmth and that passion and rah. And so cardamom is definitely like one of those that feels at home, at least for me. But I love how we kind of segued into drinks rather than like cooking as far as main meals. Because I think a lot of times we'll see, and I know I've written about stuff at times where it's like our potions, which are like teas or different things like that, because we're mixing the herbs, we're brewing them, all of that stuff. So when you're doing that, for example, like, do you place an importance on temperature too?
In terms of like this, not really.
Okay.
I know people do, especially with teas. Yeah. You are supposed to temper different teas, leaves, different temperatures. I personally don't have an emphasis on that.
Yeah.
Just because, I'm
not great at I do a little bit like that. Like, so I'm not great at the cooking like meals, but I like making teas or libations or different things like that for magical purposes. And I'll use like a warm drink when I want to attract something to me or speed something up, because warm brings that out. Or if I'm trying to move something away or freeze something out, using more of a cold beverage. But I also like, because I know we've kind of had some fun little like witch nights and stuff like that in your apartment. Are there any specific libations, like alcohol combinations or something like that you mix together for special rituals, or even just that you enjoy drinking?
Yeah. So for me personally, my witchcraft is more, so my practical witch stuff is the herbs and the cooking magic and things like that. But my more ritualistic witchy side is I work very heavily with the dead. And one common drink that is associated with the dead is absinthe, which is a French liquor made of like wormwood. And One of my favorite drinks is, I always say, the only good thing Ernest Hemingway ever did. And I forget he doesn't know we're in a feud. Like, that's the intensity for which I hate Ernest Hemingway.
I know,
Whatever. And I have to preface it because I can't give him credit without just tearing him down a little bit. I love, it's a drink called Death in the Afternoon. And it is a shot of absinthe with champagne. And that is something I'll often drink recreationally when I want to chill and calm. But when I do like ritual work, I do use absinthe as as an offering.
I love that. And also for the record, it tastes really, really good. I love absinthe. I know a lot of people don't because it has that like anise and or however you say it taste.
Or like licorice taste, yeah.
Of that flavor, it's so potent and like in your face. I know like for moon rituals and things, I'll always do some kind of a mixture of champagne and another kind of a cordial. So I really love creme de violet because violet flavor is just delicious and I love anything floral. But it really lends to like this lovey self-love type of an energy. So I love using that. I also love using elderflower liqueur with champagne when I'm looking to kind of beef up some strength or some kind of like barrier because elder is great for that. I think it's just so fun. Like again, it's cool talking about this because it is so underrated when it comes to magical things. I mean, everyone wants to be the psychic witch or the necromancing witch that conjures the dead, but there's so many different niches to kind of play with and go into. So let's see. So you had kind of mentioned you were breaking things up between like your like ritualistic side witch and your practical daily witch. Now I know you kind of do these like date night things once a month, and food is kind of a part of that. Can you run down kind of your purpose for doing that, and then kind of what your template is for those? Because I think a lot of people would probably like doing those.
Yeah, and this all stemmed from the fact, and I don't recommend this, but I don't treat myself very well. Like, every day. I work from the moment I wake up till the moment I go to bed. I don't always eat well. I don't always work out when I should. I don't always meditate. And that's not how you should live your life, like at all. So what I've done to try to balance that out is once a month, I do it's something I called solo date night. And while I'm not particularly moony, I do try to sync it with the full moon because I found it's the only way I'll remember to do it. If I think, the first of the month, or the 15th, I'm not going to remember. But because I am always around witches who always are talking about the moon, I always know when the full moon is. So that's how I remember. And so the whole idea of where it stemmed from was, what if just for how horribly I treat myself the rest of the month, what if for one night I treat myself like someone who I love, very much? And if I was going to plan a special night for someone I love, what would I do? So before the prep work, I'll usually get a bath bomb from Lush, or I'll create my own oil blend of something, and I'll go to the grocery store. I'll buy myself flowers, a bottle of wine, and I get the stuff for my favorite meal. And so I have all my stuff. And then what I start to do is I'll slowly go from each room and I'll create the atmosphere for the room. So lights off, candles on, scents. If I know I'm going to go into that room and read, I have the book laid out with it bookmarked. I want this to almost be like a play, very seamless. And I'll go into the kitchen and I'll make my favorite food. And then what I'll do is I'll have a prepped meditation for whatever's going on in my life. And I'll run the bath, my food and drink. I have a tray in the tub, music, meditation, whatever. And I commit to staying in the tub for at least an hour. It's forced relax. forced relax, because we're Aries, like we want to move on to the next thing really quickly. Yeah. And which is not the point of this, so force at least an hour. And then by the time that hour's up, if I've done everything correctly, I've set the scene. Oh, I pick out like the one thing to wear when I'm finished that makes me feel really good. And if I've done all of these steps correctly up to this point, by the time I'm done with that bath, I am in such a mindset of, I'm in such like I guess like a ritualistic mindset. Like my mind's clear. The burdens of the world aren't sitting on my shoulders. And at that point, I can do a ritual if I need to do a ritual. Or I'll do like I'll do some like guilty pleasure things, like watch that movie or read that story, or so it's very much a night of self-indulgent. And I prep it as if I'm prepping it for somebody else, because when I'm in it and I'm in that mindset, I want it to be seamless.
I love that. I think so. I have lots of questions now that are coming up from all of this. First and foremost, I love that you've incorporated not only cooking into this ritual, magical moment for you to kind of decompress, but it also really highlights self-care and the importance of self-care, and how you can work that into not only your witchcraft, but just your ritual practices as well. I kind of do the same-ish when it comes to the full moon. So I am moony. And I always love starting with a nice sensual bath, or I don't always necessarily sensual, but I'll pick out a bath bomb. I know we both love Lush bath bombs. I mean, they are amazing. Or other type of thing, like making a milk bath out of milk powder, oatmeal powder, things like that, to kind of incorporate into whatever the ritual is that I'll be doing for the full moon. But I have not done the whole eating thing with the top. Well, maybe once I ate a cupcake because it was like a birthday or something, and I wanted to celebrate myself and just be very luxurious and over the top. But I need to do those like bathtub tray things. Like that would be so helpful. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Idea.
And you can get them where they have like the sections for your things, and like you can have a book in there with you if you want. But also, there's nothing. Food tastes better in the shower or bath. I don't know why. It just does. And I'll never forget when I experienced that. I took a friend to Disney because I used to live in Florida, and the hotel we stayed at had like a complimentary drink when you walk in. So we walked in, we had a drink, but we needed to shower. So I had my drink in the shower with me, and it's nothing is as great as having something, as having a drink or food in the shower.
Well, that I will do. I'll have my little magical martini or potion like with me, and that is very luxurious because you're like chilling and it's warm and it's just fabulous. So that kind of brings me to kind of how we can use cooking magic for comfort, especially during these kind of rough times where we're confined to our houses, a good chunk of us, or others that are continuously going out and putting themselves at risk, like you're doing. And thank you so much for all of your work that you're giving to the world in so many different ways. But I think like what you just kind of even recommended, having this delicious meal, making that food, having a bath ritual, which is something that I've kind of been talking about too, what has been helping me comfort-wise. But like, what do you think would be some good, I don't know, recipes or suggestions or places to look for people who are maybe struggling with this? Just foods for comfort, like comfort foods or something along those lines that aren't just necessarily like a bag of chips or something like that you can actually cook and make.
Well, the one that I think everyone has already gotten on board with, and I don't have to suggest this at all, is bread. Because making bread, one, it's very easy, but it takes a long time. Yeah. And you really have to get out of your head to do it. And I think that's really good, because right now we all need to focus on the things in our world that we can control. And Food is that thing. So making bread, putting that work in, it takes all day. And then when you're done, you get this warm, carby thing that you can put butter on. Like if that's not the epitome of comfort, not only a comfort activity, but comfort food, you know?
I love bread. My Oprah moment. Bread. Love bread.
Bread.
Oh my God, I don't know why, but like as you're talking about this, I have this taste for like rosemary bread with like some sweet butter and like a
Yes.
little bit of salt on it. Like just sounds so incredibly delicious.
And you can even like make rosemary butter, like chop up some rosemary, put it in softened butter with some salt, and then you're good.
That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I like this. You give me some great cooking ideas. I can't leave the house and I've been trapped to crappy food. It's just horrible. Anyways, so quick question for you. So this is like something that I'm asking everybody, and maybe we've already touched on it a little bit, but because I am the Glam Witch and I talk so much about glamour. I wanted to kind of hear what your glam is. Whether that is a ritual, but I think you kind of already shared that, or products, or fashion statements, or something along those lines that that make you feel good, and that you kind of infuse with a little bit of magic as well.
So one thing I really love, and it's something that like you and I have talked about, but in my day-to-day life, like when I go out, I'm one of those people, I don't want you to pay attention to me. I'm busy. I got stuff to do. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Like I've had people say like, oh, you were like a ghost. You're in and you're out and no one knows you were there. And I'm like, that means I'm succeeding. Like, good. I don't want, but one of the ways I do, kind of glam myself is I love lingerie. I love lingerie, and even if it's something no one's ever going to see, like I love the beautiful lacy, like night dresses and things like that. I love like matching underwear bra situation. Like for me, that has like power to it. Also, I love a red lip. That's also like
your total signature look, the red lip.
A big one is a red lip. So very often, and I will incorporate this into like my solo date night ritual, is I'll pick out like a beautiful piece of lingerie and I'll like after the bath, I'll put it on, I'll get the perfume. I do the things that make me feel, glamorous and luxurious. And you and I watched this once, but Dita Von Teese did an interview and they were talking about luxury. And she was talking about how luxury doesn't have to be expensive, but like, having a few, like rose petals in a bath with some strawberries, that's luxury, but that's not necessarily expensive. And so I think there are so many ways you can dote on yourself and you can spoil yourself and indulge yourself that aren't overly gluttonous or overly expensive or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned lingerie, and also I love that you talked about matching bra and underwear, because I remember a long time ago, I don't really do it anymore, but I'd always try to match my underwear to the shirt color that I was wearing. It just felt appropriate to color coordinate. But also, I think a lot of times people forget that lingerie can be a self thing. Like it's not necessarily for other people to view, or doesn't need to necessarily be an overly sexual type of a thing. And also just glamour in general doesn't necessarily have to be for other people's like viewership. It can be what makes you feel the most comfortable, what makes you feel most excited and most luxurious. And then that transcends into your overall personality or the overall energy and magic that you're trying to conjure. So I love that you brought that up. It's really, really smart and good and fantastic. And man, now I wish that it was like the full moon so that I could do a fun full moon bath. Food.
I know. I'm ready. I'm ready. I like always around the new moon. I'm like, okay, when's the full moon? I'm ready.
It's coming up. But the new moon would be a good time to do it too. I know it works for you, and I'm more of a full moon person than the new moon. But it can be any moon, people. It doesn't even have to necessarily be around the moon. Again, Tonya, is not a moon person. It just so happens to be what works best for your schedule. I love. So do you have any like new fun projects or anything kind of in the works? I know you're always busy and you're doing so many different things, but if you wanted to kind of share anything kind of up and coming with people.
Other than what I'm always doing, so, like Witch Way Magazine and the podcast, The Witch Daily Show, I have a ton of projects right now, none of which I can talk about.
Well, hopefully they will be magically manifesting soon to a point where you can talk about them.
For sure.
Just for anyone that does not know about Witchway, I definitely have loved being a part of the Witchway family. I think like you do such an amazing job of taking care of not only the writers but the readers in general, and making it such a great communal space for learning, sharing, and growing. How many years has Witchway been around at this point, and kind of like how have you enjoyed like watching its growth and in comparison to like where it started and where it is now and where you'd like for it to be?
So for 5 years in June, but what I'm shocked it became this. Like I started it while I was like living on a friend's couch. Like I thought it was going to be that Aries thing where I like start a project and I'm over it in a month. But it just took off and I'm shocked that it's become what it's become. But we do have such an amazing community. And I think Witchway does a very good job at keeping away trolly negative people. Like we don't really see that when we post things or do videos or like articles. We don't really see a lot of crap, which is really beautiful because I feel like statistically, I feel like we should get more just like BS than what we get.
People that want to sit here and inject their crap into ours. So,
Mm-hmm. And where I wanted to go, I really want to focus more on the publishing side of Witchway. We do, if everything goes how it should, we should have by next February 4 new books. Which right now we have 2. So I feel like that's really good growth and trajectory. But I would like to focus more on that aspect because, the whole purpose of Witchway was to give people a voice who may not have a voice. So the rule with Witchway, and this has been since the beginning it started to now, is if you have something to say and you can say it well, I don't care your religion. We've had Christians write. We've had Satanists write. We've had witches write, Wiccans write. We've had every religion under the sun has written an article for Witchway. So we don't discriminate. You don't have to have a certain number of followers to write for us. Like, no. If you can say something well and you can say it, and you have something to say, we want you to say it. So the whole idea was to really just give a platform for people who for one reason or another can't have their voices heard.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of what I want to bring into, Witchway Publishing is, we're not going to find authors based off their Instagram count. We're not going to find authors based off of what big of a splash they can create on their Facebook pages. It's going to be about, do you have something to say and can you say it well?
I love that, and I know I've thanked you so many times, but like you have, what you just talked about, creating a platform and everything. But even who I was a couple of years ago, and I've been able, like, what has allowed me this opportunity to spread my wings and say what I need to say and get that out there and use it as an act of service to help support and empower the community. So I am very, very thankful for that. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess just to kind of wrap up. Do you want to plug any of like social media outlets for like Witchway or websites or different things so that people can find?
Sure. Yeah, you can find Witchway at witchwaymagazine.com. I have a website where it's just like events I've done or like links to my book, simply irresistiblemagiccom. And and then my podcast, The Witch Daily Show. If you're curious, it's witchdailyshow.com. We have a monthly book club. It's a daily podcast, so it's a little magic every day. If you're someone who does struggle with routine and ritual, I've had a lot of people say it's helped them stick to their routines, especially their witchy routines. And and we have advertising opportunities, if just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Who doesn't like advertising?
Shoot.
No, and I love what you did with this little podcast, because it is so great to have like small little podcasts to kind of like realign yourself with your daily magic. What is it like to be a daily living witch? Well, sometimes you're not doing any kind of magic. Sometimes you are. Sometimes you need that daily grounding force to kind of reestablish your connection. So I think that what this has allowed is so many people an opportunity to reground themselves in their magic with a little bite of magic in the morning. So it's really, really great. So thank you again so much for being on. Love you so much.
Yeah, no, this was so fun. It's so funny because of like all the stuff I've done. No one's ever like interviewed me like in like a witchy way. So this was super fun.
Yeah. Oh, Belle. That's a great way to end. Just Belle like
Bell barking.
And my cat's been running all over here being a jerk too. So it's like whenever I come onto the webcam, it's like the animals are all out. The snakes are flopping all over their cages. So
I know. Of course, it's like the one time my neighbor's like, "Yeah, we're gonna walk around the house and like do all this stuff." I'm like, "Can you just wait 2 minutes?"
No, thank you. Okay, well, again, thank you so much for being on, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.